Alright guys, this is our third part to this Rant series. I know some people have actually been comparing this series to like the director's cut of Luke Smith. I wouldn't say we're that fancy, alright? We're just spitballing here. But this one especially, we collected some data. We wanted to make sure we were going to cover the final aspects of Shadowkeep. So today's video is actually going to be broken into two parts. We're going to be covering Armor 2.0 and the Artifact. And there's great things that Armor 2.0 and the Artifact brought, but there's also some very bad things that it brought. So first up, let's go over Armor 2.0, the things that I like. First up, I love the idea of min-maxing armor. Like back inside of Destiny 1, tier 12 was like the thing, right? So many people used to love rocking things like 5 intellect, 5 discipline, and like 2 strength. But depending on what it is you were doing, you would allocate those things accordingly. Inside of Destiny 2 system, however, you can actually allocate your points in not just intellect, discipline, and strength, but you also get the freedom to load it in either recovery, resilience, or mobility. I'm actually a really big fan of this. I know this is essentially the same thing as Destiny 1, because what D1 did was that it allowed in the subclass itself for you to allocate things to recovery, resilience, or mobility, but inside of Destiny 2, they just throw it all in our armor. Now, another thing that I really like, inside of Shadowkeep, armor mods only require discovery for infinite use, as long as you got the Glimmer. You see, previously, you had to obtain or purchase multiple of the same mod, which was really annoying. Now, inside of Shadowkeep, though, with the infinite use, that was a huge bonus, and it just gives us freedom to do whatever we want there with those mods. Another thing I really like as well, especially this season, is that 4th mod slot. This is actually what separates armor pieces from each other. You see, that 4th slot, guys, actually allows you to slot an activity mod. This is actually a really cool aspect because this gives value to certain sets of armor depending on what activity you're doing. So obviously the raid armor is really good in the raid in Garden of Salvation, simply because you could slot those activity mods that helps you throughout the raid. Things like Enhanced Relay Defender. And then on the other side, you've got like Nightmare Armor that allows you to slot mods that helps you in those nightmare hunts. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that activity mod. The only thing I'm not a fan of when it comes to that activity mod is like, yes, it does give value to those armor pieces, but at the same time, instead of going into the raid to get a raid armor set and raid mods to make that armor set and me more powerful in the raid, I can just go play Iron Banner and slot those same raid mods into my Iron Banner armor. Now I know this is like Bungie's way of giving more value, I guess, to the Iron Banner sets, but it's kind of like counterproductive in a way, right? Now with that being said, those are the things that I like. Now, let's move into the things that we don't like about Armor 2.0. Alrighty, this one's gonna be a little tougher, as we're gonna try to give solutions to these things, but I will go ahead and say that some of the solutions we give are not the say-all in all. This is more or less us pointing out what we don't like, but I am open for all solutions. So first up, Elemental Affinity really destroys min-maxing your armor. All right, so when you get a piece of armor in the game currently, it drops with an Elemental Affinity. It's either Void, Solar, or Arc. Now, the reason why Bungie did this is they've actually tied certain weapons and perks to those elements. So for instance, if I land a piece of armor that's like 65 or plus, it's a beautiful piece of armor. It's got great stats on it in terms of sum of points, and I can't wait to use this piece of armor with my last word sniper combo. If the armor piece rolls with Solar Affinity or Arc Affinity, I cannot use that armor with my loadout. I could, but if I wanted to use something like enhanced perks that would directly and greatly help my current loadout, I wouldn't be able to do that unless it rolled with the affinity that ties into my loadout. And that's just from like a build perspective. The reality is, with Armor 2.0 in Elemental Affinities, you add another level of RNG that really has no upside to it. It's just like more RNG on more RNG on more RNG, which is kind of crazy because there's no upside to it. There's no like, okay, there's a reason why there's Elemental Affinities. I know some of us would say it's for balance purposes, but it's kind of annoying. Like if I want to rock a hand cannon with an SMG, I can rock those two things together, but I have to use general mods for one of those. That's just one example. And having these elemental affinities that Bungie has in place and locking certain weapon combos to those affinities is almost like Bungie's way of saying this is how you need to play the game. And I don't like that. That's the opposite of what we wanted from Armor 2.0. We want freedom here to min-max and do whatever we want with our builds. And elemental affinities, for the most part, is adding another layer of RNG with no upside. It's just like Bungie's way of extending the grind for no reason when things are already already grindy. You already have to get a piece of armor that has high stat points. Then it has to have high stat points, hopefully in the places you want it to have stat points in. Like if you're hunting down a max intellect build, you better hope whatever piece of armor you got in front of you that you're so proud of because it just rolled with max points, hopefully some of those points are in intellect. You may have just got that piece of armor and it has like 2 points in intellect. So not only are we hunting for armor pieces with max points, we're also hunting for armor pieces with max points in the right stat categories. And then on top of that, you better hope to God its affinity matches whatever build you're rocking. The RNG gods just blessed you with some arc gauntlets. Well, I hope you like using shotguns. Better get crazy with that bow and that machine gun. And that's kind of the problem, because Bungie is like making decisions for our loadouts and certain weapon combinations that really should be left up to the freedom of the player. Now, as bad as I'm making elemental affinity out to be, I can actually work around it to some degree. Where I can't work around it is on exotic pieces. This is when things get way out of hand. Exotic armor pieces also rolls with elemental affinities. So, exotics being rare all on its own, you now have to regrind for, yes, even in year 3. And like the way I was looking at Armor 2.0 was that I was gonna save all of this vault space, because ideally I would go in there, regrind a piece of exotic with max armor stats as high as I can get it, and that would be the piece that I lock in. But now that we're tying elemental affinities to exotic pieces, you've got to keep 3 of every piece of exotic. And you don't have to. I'm just saying most hardcore players are going to be forced to do this. You finally grind it out for another set of Doom Marchers for like the 100th freaking time. It drops with solar affinity. Well, bud, I hope you like fusion rifles, because that's what you're using. So yes, I can actually work around elemental affinities on legendary pieces of armor. I cannot work around it when it comes to exotics. It is way overkill. And again, there's no major benefit to having elemental affinities here. And like I've often thought about this, what if you happen to get like a matching solar set of armor and you gain some like passive skill, similar to like our Gambit Prime armor? Now, whether or not that's something that Bungie's thinking about, I don't know. All I do know is right now, it's an added level of RNG that just makes the game stupid. Not only that, it just gives me a headache, because it's not like we have some loadout builder in game. I'm over here trying to like get Excel spreadsheets together to figure out how I want to min-max my armor. That's annoying. Not only that, for the casual player, they're never going to waste their time doing that, which kind of opposes Shadowkeep to begin with New Light. If Bungie really wanted us to entertain Armor 2.0 to the fullest, to the extent that they probably want us to entertain it, we need something in-game that would allow us to spec our loadouts, see what armor pieces look like even after we masterwork it, and then save those loadouts. Like if I want to save a loadout called Pound Town that specs everything for strength, by all means, there needs to be something in game that allows that. And I think previously, before, the idea of saving loadouts was not necessary because we didn't have all of these different elements at play. Now we do though, and simplifying the game, that way people can understand it more and enjoy their loadouts more and actually become more involved with build crafting is more than enough reason to implement this feature. Now, when I think about solutions overall, we know that general perks are coming in the next season. They're going to actually be adding more general perks to the game. QJ actually brought it up last night. He used Warframe as a reference where you can actually use any mod on any piece of gear, but matching gear allows for those mods to be cheaper. So if I happen to have a solar helmet, I can use an enhanced hand cannon targeting perk on it, but say it costs 8 instead of 6, which I honestly think is a pretty good solution. Regardless though, elemental affinities adds a layer of RNG that has really no upside to it other than just elongating the grind. It also locks different weapon combos together, which also limits our build crafting. I think the idea of actually making certain mods cost more on certain pieces of armor that don't have matching elements is a really good solution to all of this. And for me, when it comes to exotics, I would just like to outright remove elemental affinities on exotics. They already take long enough to grind, and on top of taking long enough to grind, there's no reason why I have to keep 6 different sets of Doom Marchers. I do it though, because some days I'm like, hey, maybe I want to rock this set of Doom Marchers that came spec for mobility. And then the next day I'm like, oh, maybe I'm going to go with this other set of Doom Marchers because I want to rock a fusion rifle today. You see where I'm coming from? It just needs to be outright removed on our exotics. And again, this is just my opinion. I'm not saying these are the say-all, end-all solutions. I'm just trying to open up the conversation. Moving on though, guys, let's talk about artifacts. First, the things we like about artifacts. It adds greatly to build crafting. I mean, it's phenomenal. Whenever we talked about artifacts last summer, before before we saw screenshots or anything, I really didn't know the depth of what artifacts were going to bring. They add so much to the game though. Not only that, it also seems like it could potentially serve as future sandbox testing. You see guys, this is like an ingenious way of Bungie to temporarily test things before permanently adding it to the game. So for example, something like Oppressive Darkness. Bungie now has a lot of data for the past like 6-7 weeks and for this entire season that shows who used Oppressive Darkness the most and which subclass seemed to benefit the most from it, which ones was a little more out of hand. And should this be a mod that gets permanently added to a specific subclass down the road? And again guys, Oppressive Darkness is that artifact mod that allows your grenades to weaken your enemies. It's actually a beautiful artifact mod, but we could potentially see that mod added directly to a subclass of Bungie's choice. Now another thing we like, which could be looked at as either a good thing or a bad thing, but after talking with QJ last night as well as Dimitri, it seems like more of a good thing because the artifact and its mods actually shifts people to use other subclasses for that season. So this season, we have a lot of artifact mods that benefit Arc and Void subclasses. And pretty much this entire season, the entire meta when it comes to our subclasses have been shifted. I used to use nothing but hammers inside of PvE and PvP. This is the least I have ever used hammers in my life. Now you can look at that as a bad thing because it's like, all right, Bungie, now you're pushing me to use other subclasses when I just want to use hammers. Or you can actually look at it as a good thing, which is, hey, instead of me constantly being told to use hammers with melting point inside of PvE, now I can be like, no, I'm going to use Oppressive Darkness with my Empowering ×2 Heart of Inmost Light build, and it's very much a viable build. These artifact mods shifts the meta, and it's going to shift again even next season, which kind of keeps things more fresh. And during that shift, Bungie is able to actually collect more data to, of course, make future sandbox changes permanently to certain subclasses. And again, Bungie normally doesn't like making moves to any of our subclasses without having a pretty good bit of data on it, right? So artifact mods to me almost serves as like a PTR for Destiny. It's only there for a season and it allows Bungie to test things out. Now, moving on to the things that we don't like. And really, there's only one thing we don't like about artifact mods, and that is allowing these artifact mods to work inside of PvP. Now, quite frankly, the first couple of weeks was hysterical. I fell in love. I was like, oh my God, my sticky grenades are one-hit killing. My melees are one-hit killing. It was nasty and it was super chaotic. And on some level, chaos is a lot of fun. But as you know, as the weeks drag on, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th week, after you've been killed by that one-eye mass titan, rocking Thunder Coil and Bottom Tree Striker, you start to question life. As much fun as these artifact mods are, they are quite game-breaking inside of PvP. Now we actually have two solutions to this. You can either just go in there and outright remove artifact mods from every playlist. Just make it to where it's no longer usable inside of PvP, which I'm not gonna lie is kind of a bummer. I don't really want to see that, okay? Because it is fun for the first couple of weeks, right? So ideally, I think artifact mods shouldn't be allowed in PvP except in the weekly 6v6 rotator. Like this week right now, it's lockdown. I don't know how many people even go to this playlist, but hey, for those people that are actually looking for more mayhem inside of Crucible, this is perfect. And it might actually even drive more players to participate in that playlist. But every other playlist, I would lock it out of. Or in the least, lock it out of comp. But I really think it would be in the community's best interest to completely remove artifact mods for PvP and lock it to the 6v6 weekly rotator playlist. And that's pretty much it. That's really the only downside to artifact mods. There is one other downside, but I kind of feel alone whenever I talk about this. I've brought it up before that I wish exotics would allow us to slot things like anti-barrier mods on it, unstoppable mods, overload mods. As this season inside of PvE activities, I've pretty much been forced to use legendary weapons simply because I can attach those mods to them. I don't know how y'all feel about it. I've brought it up, like I said in the past. Nobody was real definitive on where they stood on the topic. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little biased on it. I just want to use Huckleberry all the time, okay? So like whenever I say things like that, it really just means I want to use Sunshot or Huckleberry or one of my favorite exotics inside of PvE in those in-game activities like Nightfall Ordeals, and unfortunately I can't. Well guys, that is our breakdown for Shadowkeep Sandbox, Armor 2.0, and the artifact mods. Overall, Shadowkeep has really brought a lot of good things when it comes to build crafting, min-maxing. All of that stuff is a lot of fun, but some of the decisions they made kind of shot themselves in the foot, especially for my less hardcore players. You gotta give people a bone. You gotta give something for people to chase without making the end of the tunnel seem unreachable. As of right now, whenever I sit there and I min-max armor, I feel like I'm locked into too many different things. Weapon combos are being decided for me without letting me choose it myself. Armor sets are being disqualified simply because of its elemental affinities, which completely contradicts Armor 2.0. Let me know in the comments below what you think, fellas. How you stand on this. Curious to know, man. Maybe you love the way the system is now. Some people like RNG to the power of 10, you know? But feel free to let us know. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.